day's a day, a bad luck's always a coming my way.
I'm going to sit back like this. Yeah. All right. All right, ready? You ready? For today's grim adventure, we find ourselves talking with the legendary Tom Holland. And the list of credits to your name, writing and directing, is just absolutely insane. But today we're going to talk about 3. Psycho 2, Child's Play, and Fright Night. Looking back on Child's Play, I mean, obviously, everybody who's watching this is a big fan of like the series and what it's become and all this craziness. But going back, do you have something you go, wow, I was a part of that? Like, what's your favorite memory about working on Child's Play?
Oh, well, there were so many. All the actors, Catherine Hicks, the little boy, Chris Sarandon. I mean, everybody. But it was a huge challenge, and I was very insecure about the doll.
How so?
Well, because I didn't know whether or not I was going to be able to sell the illusion of the doll coming alive.
Okay, I see it.
You know, because the movements were, some of the movements were amazing, but in other ways it was very, very limited. And so the shots when the doll was most animated was when I could shoot on the doll, and then behind the doll you would have these cables going down, and I drilled a hole in the floor and I built the apartment set about 4 or 5 feet off the floor of the set. And down below was a full team of 11 or 12 puppeteers animating the doll. But because I hid the doll, I hid the cables behind the doll. So, and those things worked, but sometimes I couldn't do it, or I couldn't do this or that. So it was a melange. Putting together Child's Play was the series of a number of shots. I had a little person, Ed Gale, who sold the fact the doll was alive, and at the same time I had to build sets I had to scale the sets up. Like Ed Gale is the one that gets burned in the fireplace, and crashes out of the fireplace, and he's underneath the Chucky head. He's got a breather because he's on fire. But Ed, I forget exactly how tall Ed was, but he certainly was taller than the doll. So I did things like that. So it's a combination. When you look at it, it's a combination of the work of the effects supervisor and the little person, and some forced perspective, where the sets are bigger than they would be if it was just the doll. And all of it together. And when I was shooting it, I didn't know whether or not it was going to work enough that the audience could go with me, that the doll had come alive. I mean, I knew they'd want to.
And now look at it. It's insane.
Well, he's sort of like the last horror icon.
Right.
And you've got 40 years. But I mean, I'm forever thankful and forever amazed. But when I started in this business, films had no life after they were released, even if they were successful. Their post-release life in movie houses would be in syndication on TV, and then they were forgotten. And I assumed that nobody would remember anything I never thought anybody would remember any of my films. And wow, look at me now. Look at what's happened. I mean, because of Mancini, Child's Play is now still going 40 years later. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really understand a lot of different things that were going on. The producer on that, David Kirshner, I was making the penultimate killer doll movie. Or I was bringing, there wasn't really a killer doll movie previous, I don't think. But my intention was to have you amazed, keep you rooted to the spot, have huge laughs to release it, and to scare the living hell out of you at the same time. But what he'd seen, what David had seen, was a huge merchandising opportunity.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know, and when you think about it, I mean, I'm sure that if either one of us knew how the profits flowed, that you'd probably find merchandising has made a ton more money than the movies itself.
You know, I could be wrong about this, but now you say that, the first thing that pops to mind is, aside from the Child's Play series, the only other series or something on film, whether it's movie or TV, that I remember so much merchandise was from the Munsters. So you got the Munsters and Child's Play. That's like, there's so much of it.
Well, okay.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just the first thing that popped ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's you know I wasn't thinking about profits. I was thinking about doing a film that would just amaze people and root them to the spot.
Yeah.
And I also learned so much from working with Richard Franklin in Psycho, and having gone through. Richard Franklin and I, for Psycho 2, looked at every Hitchcock movie he'd ever done and picked out those sequences, what they now call the kills.
Yeah.
But you know, pick out those sequences where the camera, where the action moved forward with visual set pieces and not with dialogue, and then I incorporated those into Psycho 2. But what I did with Child's Play was what Hitchcock taught. I started out, the first opening scene in Child's Play is Brad Dourif getting killed and putting his soul into that of the doll. And then you never see Brad again, physically, but you hear his voice.
Right.
But that means that you, the audience, knows that inside that doll is a mad serial killer. And so you as the viewer are sitting there waiting for the reveal. While the people in the movie, Kara, the mother, and everybody, they don't have a clue. And who's gonna believe a story like that? Oh my God, the little boy saying, "Oh, my doll did this." Yeah, you know what I mean? So nobody believes you. And I also, I'm proud of this, but I also did one of the great visual set pieces a la Hitchcock. If you look at the movie now, when Karen gets home after being at the police station, where the cops think maybe her little boy did this, and she comes home and she picks up the good guy box to throw it away, and the batteries fall out. Okay? And now she's thinking, oh my gosh, was little Andy telling some sort of truth about the doll? And she goes into the living room and she picks the doll up and turns it on its back and opens the battery case, and it's empty. And then the doll, this is The Exorcist, then the doll does a 180, the head, and looks up at her and says, "Hi, want to play?" Ah! And she drops it, right? You remember this.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and it rolls under the couch. And then she gets down and she lifts the hem of the couch and she looks into the darkness of the doll, and I shot over the doll on Catherine, and it's her eyes exposed. And we, the audience, knows that damn doll's alive, and she doesn't believe it yet. And there's nothing more vulnerable than your naked eyes. And is the doll going to blind her? What's it going to do? And that's when she pulls it out and stands up to it. She's trying to save her son, her little 6-7-year-old son. She shakes the doll. Are you alive? It's nothing from the doll. And she pulls that screen away from the fireplace and throws the match in and lights the fireplace. And now she threatens to throw the doll in the fireplace. And biggest scream in the movie, it comes alive and goes for her throat and says, "You dirty bitch!" Ah! You know. And anyway, so And then she chases it all the way down and out of the apartment. That's an 8-minute sequence. And it's all visual, all building to the go for the throat. And that was consistently the biggest scream in the previews. I mean, you know, so it worked. You don't know what it's like as a director, writer, to have something in your head and then you see it work with an audience. It's one of the best feelings in the world. So that's Child's Play.
I want to go on a camping trip with you and have you tell ghost stories around a campfire because this is better than the movie. I'm just saying.
It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fun.
It's fun.
It's fun.
Well, it's fun when it works. I've done things that didn't work too.
Your time working on Psycho 2, which you wrote, looking back at it, do you have a favorite memory, like something that sticks out like from that time that you go, man, I can't believe I was a part of Psycho 2?
Well, actually, yes. Working with Richard Franklin, the Australian director who's no longer with us, but it was the best relationship I ever had as a writer working with the director. And I did a pitch for myself. I did a book called Oh Mother, What Have You Done?, which is on Amazon, about the experience. But that was a moment in time when both of us desperately needed that movie, and everybody was telling us it was the kiss of death and we'd never work again if we did it because of having the temerity to do a sequel. This is before sequels. To do a sequel of what even then was considered the classic horror movie. And Psycho, I was alive then, I saw it was like 12 or 13. That changed horror. That's the first slasher movie, you know, and we'd never seen anything like that before. And so at that point, Hitchcock, even then, was considered like a god in filmmaking. And everybody thought that the critics were going to savage us. And also, we didn't have Tony Perkins. And it started out as a cable movie. Just when cable was coming in, if you look on the credits, it says Oak Communications is one of the producers.
Okay.
And that was a cable company in San Diego. And we wanted a feature film. And the only way to do that was to get Tony Perkins to say, yes, I'll come back and play Norman Bates again. And Tony had consistently turned down every suggestion because he was at best ambivalent about playing Norman Bates because in a lot of ways he felt that it had wrecked his career in a way and pigeonholed him. He was a young romantic lead.
I remember reading about that.
Yeah, previous to Psycho, he was in he did Look Homeward Angel on Broadway. Young girls were lined up, you know, outside the theater. He did a great Civil War movie. I can't remember the name now, but anyway, he was on his way to being established as a young lead in Hollywood, and because it was Hitchcock, he agreed to do Psycho. He hardly spent any time working on it. You know, I mean, I forget how many days it was, 5 or 6 days, something like that. And he went back to New York in between shooting on the original Psycho. He had no idea that it was going to have the effect that it did, or that he would forever after be thought of as the actor who brought Norman Bates alive.
When I was doing Psycho 2, I hadn't touched the part of Norman, you know, for many, many years, for what, 20 years or something like that. And I was sitting in Richard Franklin's office, and he was auditioning some girls for the part of, what was her name? Yeah, Meg Tilly. But what was the character's name? Come on, what? Mary? Yeah. And he said, is it okay if we videotape some of this? Can we put some of this on videotape? And so I found myself yeah, in front of a video camera, you know, those things never go away. You're always going to have those videos will come back to haunt you, just like this one will come back to haunt you. So I found myself having to come up with it, and I realized I was going to have to do any of this, acting that very day, and I found myself having to kind of like summon up Norman, like from one second to the next, and I didn't think I might be able to do that. So I did what you do when you played a part before, and when it's a part that's kind of haunted you and kept you going. I said, Norman, you know, show up now. I need you to get me through this tape. So there is a point to the story, believe it or not. There is a moment in that scene that we were reading together where he said something about, he was using the word cut for cutting the sandwich, I think. Isn't that how it was? What was it? What is it? Oh, cutlery, thank you. And I stumbled over that word. On that reading with Meg Tilly, as we were sitting there in the director's office, I hadn't even thought of this. I hadn't even ever read the scene before. But this cutlery line came out of me. And Richard said, oh, and by the way, when we get to that scene, when we do it, I want you to do that very same thing in the film. I said, hey, what are you, am I a performing dog? You know, but that was Norman, you know, that was Norman coming down from wherever he peacefully, I hope, lives. And I was receiving that from him and doing that of him and about him and through him. And sure enough, I did the film too.
And so then after that, of course, every offer he got was to play Norman Bates again, and that drove him absolutely nuts. So how was I going to write a script that would be enough of a challenge to actors, and that's talking about the character arc, to get him to make the part so attractive and such a challenge that he would say yes to doing it again. And I had been an actor for years before I made the transition first to writing and then to directing, and I knew about what actors like in terms of having a character to play. So it's more than just, you know, so it's subtext as well as the lines. And I think that I did that quite successfully in Psycho 2. And he said yes.
I'm convinced that the writer and the director have gotten together a story which hangs together and hangs by itself as well as the original did.
And when he said yes, all of a sudden, Universal, which had thought this was just a cable movie, put out a press release saying, Tony Perkins is coming back to play Norman Bates in Psycho 2, and the world went mad.
Oh, man.
You know, and at that point, Universal looked down at all the press that it generated and said, hey, maybe we have a feature film here, which is what Richard Franklin, the director, and I were hoping for, you know.
And stay fingers and bones crossed.
Oh, everything, because we both needed it. Richard was at the height at that point. He just finished Road Games in Australia, which had talent all over it, and he was really concentrated. It's all in the book that I wrote, Oh Mother, but he really, really wanted to do it and realized that it was a chance for him to shine as a director. And he was a Hitchcock devotee, and he had gotten Hitchcock to come down to USC and talk to a film class, a seminar down there, in a time before they did that. You know, this is just a beat after the George Lucas class at USC. And the film turned out to be amazing. And Tony was amazing, and all the actors, Dennis Franz, and you know, it was just an incredible experience and what it did is it changed my career, because before that, I had my first break with The Beast Within, which was a film that UA released, last film they released before they went bankrupt, but I got buried in the rubble of The Dance, the Michael Cimino film, which bankrupted them, and nobody knew about it or knew that it had made money or anything else. So I had been working for years trying to transition from acting to writing, and I was keeping myself alive, if you believe it or not, by doing acting jobs. And then I got my first film with Beast Within, and I didn't work for a year. And then Richard offered me Psycho 2, and I didn't have a lot to lose, you know? So I said yes, and I probably worked harder on that script than I ever have in anything else.
It's funny because speaking of writing and writing the script, that's the movie that started it all for you. And for me, in the entire world of horror, especially in Psycho, one of my favorite scenes is the kitchen scene with the shovel. I love that. And I think about it not every day because I'm not weird like that, or maybe I do, but I love that. Now, I have to ask, and
how did we do it?
Well, we could get to that, but there's something else that's been on my head. And I always hate asking people, what was it like working with this person? What was it like working with that? Because we try to think of something a little bit different. But did you get to spend some time with Tony Perkins?
Oh yeah, I mean, all the way through it. In between takes, we'd talk. I went over to his house for dinner with him and his wife, and we went out to the Ivy down on Robertson or wherever it was to dinner. Yes, I mean, Tony was very interesting. He was probably one of the brightest actors I've ever worked with. And he was also a great friend of Stephen Sondheim. And at that moment in time, I was playing, and a lot of people were what they called movie trivia. You know, you name a movie, I'll name a star in it. Okay, now you name another movie that star was in.
Right.
And we would play that in between takes, you know. And he got bored with it and said, enough of this. Let's start doing it with music composers and production designers. And he knew, and I didn't have a clue. You know, I mean, but that's how encyclopedic his knowledge of film was. So I thought he was really interesting. I don't know if you call him nice or not, because there was always something there that was Norman Bates. You know, I mean, you know, he was mercurial.
Mercurial, I like
There's
that.
a good word for you. You know, and also he was a health nut at that time, and the first one that I knew that was drinking, you know, bottled water on a set. And then I realized, you know, several years later it was probably because he was ill.
Yeah.
You know, and his wife, but his wife was absolutely lovely. You know, and she was Marissa Berenson's sister. I forget her name right now. But it was a lovely family, and they lived up off in Nichols Canyon. And anyway, everything about that movie from my standpoint was just fabulous. You know, well, I took and I boarded it out on corkboard with 2x4 cards.
Yeah.
And so every scene, and Richard worked with me, or I got agreement from Richard on every scene and how he was going to shoot it. And so Richard shot what I wrote and what I had in my head. So it wasn't one of those situations which I have been in where, you know, the director sort of doesn't get what's on the page. But Richard did, because he'd been there when I created it.
Now, I keep looking off camera, and we're going to point this out later on. And I'm going to tell you what I'm looking at, because it keeps catching my eye because it's menacing. It's the bat from Fright Night.
Yes.
And Fright Night is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Thank you so much, Brian.
And
Thank you.
you are the creative mind behind it. I mean, you wrote it, you directed it. I love looking at behind the scenes footage of this, and I have so many questions. And when it comes to Grimm interviews, I always go back to that one. What is your favorite movie? What is your favorite moment working on Fright Night? Like when you look back and you go, man, I was there for this. This is what I'm going to take away from it till the very end.
Oh, well, there's so many. I had a chance to rehearse them, that I had 2 weeks of rehearsals with the cast. I've never had it since. And we broke that script down, and then I ran it like a stage play on a sound stage, and I taped out the rooms, you know, and I ran the whole thing. It's like a 3-act play.
Yeah.
You can do that with it. And I had Colin Higgins there. And if you know, does that name ring a bell at all?
It does not.
Okay, 9 to 5, Silver Streak.
Yes, got it.
Yeah. Anyway, so he was there to give me his thoughts because he was a friend. And anyway, watching that, it came alive on the stage before I ever shot it. And I could look at it, and the acting was so good from all of them at that point, and they nailed their parts, especially the blessed Roddy McDowell, that it was just, I knew that if I could get it on film, the actors had it to give. And that was such a moment of being thrilled, and yet, of course, terrified that I wasn't going to get it on film. And then amazed because of what happened between me and the actors and Jan Kieser, the DP, and everybody else. There were amazing moments. Like my favorite moment that I captured on film was down in the basement when Roddy and Charlie Brewster are down there looking for the coffin and Jerry Dandridge, and all of a sudden Charlie hears Amy call from the stairway, "Charlie," and he turns around and looks, and she comes down in that flowing white dress, and she starts towards him, and he starts to lose his resolve, and she starts to smile, and she lifts her teeth, and you see the fangs, and he pulls the cross out, and she goes, "Oh," and turns away from him, and then she guilts him, and she says, "Oh, Charlie, you promised you'd save me." And his resolve starts to slip a little bit, and he lowers the cross. I saw that in the rehearsal on a Friday night, and I said to myself, oh my gosh, when she turns, if her mouth is full of the most ferocious set of fangs you've ever seen in your life, that's going to be a huge scream. And I had some brilliant effects guys. I had Steve Johnson and Randy Cook. And I told them that I needed to have a set of shark's teeth for Amy's mouth when I shot it on Monday morning. And they said, well, that doesn't give us any time. And I said, well, I have to have it. And they said, well, promise us it won't be beyond that brief shot. It won't be seen in the movie. I said, okay, we'll never do anything with it beyond that. And of course, it turns out to be the dominant image on the one sheet, and probably what everybody thinks of. And they came up with a shark's mouth for her and put it in, and it worked brilliantly. And that's probably my favorite creative moment, because it works so well and has become what everybody thinks of when they talk about the movie.
I love that you said the favorite thing that you ever caught on film. Doing what we do, we have over 1,000 videos now. We travel the world.
Oh my gosh.
And it's all unscripted, and it's just whatever we find. And often, I'm turning to my wife, Jessica. I call her Baby Ghoul in the videos.
Baby Ghoul?
Yeah. I often tell her, this has to be my favorite moment that I've ever caught on film.
Okay.
Not favorite memory, but favorite thing I've ever pointed a camera at and captured. So I love that. I must be doing something right.
Well, it's trying, and it's thinking.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. Let's be honest.
Right.
You know, I mean, in Child's Play, they had the doll riding up with the old couple, and they go out of the elevator, and the wife looks back and says, "Oh, what an ugly doll," and they walk away. And then Chucky says, "F you." huge laugh from the audience. I mean, but who knows? I mean,
Right.
I didn't write that. I looked at that in the editing room and I said, what about if we have an FU there? And we tried it and we did previews on it and it was huge laugh. I mean, so, you know, you get lucky sometimes. You know, the other times you get wiped out, so, you know.
Just like Child's Play, we did a deep dive in Fright Night, and I'm actually very proud of this because I don't think anybody's ever found it before since then. There's a lot of speculation, but in our video, I searched and I searched, but we found the exact alleyway where Stephen Jeffries gets it.
Oh, in Fright Night?
Yeah.
Oh my God, okay.
I have to ask you a question, maybe you remember, maybe you don't. Did you use 2 different alleyways for that scene?
Well, yes, for when the vampire's coming after him and he looks back and hears him approaching. Yes, yeah.
Then we got it right.
But then the alleyway where he gets
It's a lot
trapped.
tinier, a lot smaller.
Yeah, but that we put a false backing in.
Yes.
Put a false backing in, so he runs into the false backing, and he stops and he realizes he's trapped.
Yeah.
And that's a different alley.
This is the alley that had the dead end. You can tell that it's a lot skinnier. Now on the left-hand side, you see that short wall, and then if we come down here, you see this other wall. Look, now it's starting to look like the movie. Now, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think right where this wall ends on the left-hand side, they put a fake wall, and that's where they had him stop and turn around, and you see the mist coming in, which is actually Jerry Dandridge. And, well, that's how evil gets it. If you're interested, after we're all done, I'll have to show you so you can see what it looks like, and I think I got it.
Okay,
Man.
okay. I wonder if I'd remember, I don't know.
Huh? It's a trip down memory lane. Now, just like every...
I gotta tell you something.
Okay.
I was so lucky on Fright Night that I had a wonderful cast and crew, but especially to the crew, prop man, DP, and I had Richard Edlund's group from Ghostbusters. I had the best effects crew in Hollywood at that moment because Columbia was keeping them on because they thought they were going to do the sequel to Ghostbusters immediately. And we're looking up at the bat up there. That started out as a monster in Ghostbusters before it was adapted for Fright Night into a bat. Steve Johnson knows the story.
Honk, honk.
Yeah.
Oh, one more thing. See, things just keep popping in the head. The nightclub scene where Amy's dancing with Jerry.
Yeah.
It's now a shoe store.
Say what?
It's a shoe store now.
It's a shoe store?
Yeah.
I thought it was a hardware store.
Not anymore. It's like a WSW or something like that. It's a shoe store.
That I didn't know, but it was like a Mason's.
Maybe then. Yeah.
Way back in like 1920s,
Yeah.
because look at how beautiful it is.
Right?
Look at all the. Well, that's Sean DeCure, production designer, and his son Junior that picked it out.
It still looks like it. The stairs, the railings, everything's still there, but now it's just racks of shoes. Who would have thought?
Boy, hard to believe. But I mean, a tip of the hat to production designers, John and John Junior DeCure. They not only did they find the shoe store for the disco in Fright Night, but John Sr. found the Brewster Building.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, those guys give your movies a look, depending on how lucky you are.
Right.
I mean, that's why I say that, film really is a group effort. Writing is not. That's you and a blank page, and there's nothing more terrifying. But making a movie, if you have a good crew behind you, it can make a huge difference.
I have one final question. All right. And years ago, I heard a rumor about this, and I fingers and bones crossed that it would always come to be, that it would be made. I heard something that you wanted to make a Fright Night Part 2, like a direct sequel to that movie. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but I also heard another rumor that you're actually working on something currently that has something to do with Fright Night story?
What I did was I couldn't get, the rights are split.
Okay.
Because that was an original that I did on spec. And I withheld literary, dramatic, and musical rights to me. But through a series of machinations having to do with the remake by Spielberg, the rights ended up with Sony.
Okay.
And
rights issues.
Yeah, that's maybe a little bit technical for the audience, I don't know, but and I haven't been able to get anybody to move, because what you can depend on with large corporations is they have no clue about their catalogs, nor any idea how to particularly exploit them financially. So what I have done is I wrote a Fright Night book called Fright Night Origins. And that starts literally the next scene after the end of the Fright Night movie. Okay?
Okay.
This isn't easy, Jessica.
It's not, I know.
And it doesn't help that we were just attacked by the Fright Night bat. I think we are officially
Is that okay?
back online. See what I did there?
Okay.
All right.
Okay, anyway, I wrote a novel which is up on Amazon called Fright Night Origins, which starts literally at the end of the movie.
Okay.
It is the next scene after they're all embracing each other in the basement. And that's been out for a year. And then literally in the next week or so, I have Fright Night Aftermath, which is the next book in what I hope is a series. And of course, I'm hoping that if they're successful enough, then maybe Sony will think about making a movie with them. Now, I also did something called the 40th Anniversary Original Cast Fright Night Reading. And I did it for Table Read Podcasts, and that's coming out, Act 1 is coming out tomorrow, Tuesday.
Okay.
And I think that that's just phenomenal. It's the original cast plus Mark Hamill playing Peter Vincent, the Roddy McDowell part. And he's extraordinary. And I have Rosario Dawson also guest starring. And that's all audio, but it is just so much fun.
Yeah.
And then from that, I'm going into another podcast for Table Read from the company called Manifest Media, and Table Read that is called Fright Night Resurrection, a Love Story. And that's going to be a podcast too, that I'm doing also as a podcast, and that's much longer. That's like 100,000 words. It's the whole story about how everybody comes back 30 years later and all hell breaks loose in the Brewster house, and the Dandridge house is occupied once more, and the people in the Dandridge house are not nice, and they're in the business of resurrecting Jerry Dandridge.
Oh man.
Yeah, that's the next podcast after we get through with the original cast reading with Mark Hamill, which we're coming out with now. So I've been a very busy guy, I think. I can't keep things straight anymore.
I heard that you write almost nonstop, that they have to pull you away.
Well, it's the goddamnedest thing. I mean, it takes me 6-7 hours. I try to do 800 to 1,200 or 1,500 words a day. And Stephen King, and I've worked with Stephen. Stephen does 2,000 words a day like a machine. You know, I mean, I don't know how he does that, and he's still doing it. He came down and acted for me in Langoliers, the miniseries.
Yeah.
And he would, because he was doing a guest spot, and he came down, and he was a nervous wreck because I'd pulled him away from writing. I've never seen anything like it. He was in worse shape than I've ever been in one of my worst insecurity attacks. And it was because he wasn't at the keyboard. That's how compulsive he is. And I can't help but compare myself, not in terms of talent or what we're doing, but in terms of how prolific he is.
Yeah.
I mean, he's really daunting.
Now, you've been doing this for quite some time. Do you find, with your writing?
I have my first check on the wall in there framed, and it was September 1975.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's 25, 35, 45, 48 years or something like that. And I was an actor for 10 years before that.
Do you find when you write, do you kind of stick within your own like little element in your office, or if you're out and about and you go, wait, I have an idea, do you carry around a notebook and write things down?
I have the ideas outside or whatever.
But they stay with you.
But in order to make it real, I've got to come in and sit in the office.
Gotcha.
And I mean, there are a lot of explanations for that. You know, getting an idea, we're forever trying to grab the muse. We're forever trying to force, you know, having an idea that's so compulsive you can't stop yourself from getting into the room to write. That happened to me on Fright Night. I did Cloak and Dagger, if you've ever seen that.
Love that movie.
With Jack Black, yeah, again, Dabney Coleman, and the boy from E.T.
The finger screwed me up.
Oh yeah, well that's Hitchcock. But that's taken from 31 Steps. It's Cornell Woolrich's juvenile version of Rear Window.
Okay.
Is what Cloak and Dagger is, and it's a Boy Who Cried Wolf story, and I created the imaginary character of Jack Black because I had to make it. You couldn't just do, you know, Boy Who Cried Wolf, or at least I felt like I couldn't. But I had the idea then. I said, if you wanted a teenager to look out the window and see something happening in the next door, make him a mad horror fan, Charlie Brewster, and have him look out the window and see a vampire next door chomping down on a beautiful young girl. And I thought that was a good idea, and I was excited about it. And I went with Richard Franklin to the Black Tower, which is the executive suites at Universal, and I pitched it, and they threw me out the door. Because at that point in time, vampires were dead. They'd had a huge disaster with the musical of Dracula, and then they'd done a comedy with it, Love at First Bite, with George Hamilton. And if you go into comedy in a genre, that means the genre's exhausted. When the genre turns into farce, that means it needs a rest.
Okay.
And that's where vampires were, but I couldn't get the idea out of my head. And I kept walking around after Cloak and Dagger and trying to figure out how to do it. And I didn't have a story. What I had was an idea, a concept. And then I thought, well, what would I do if I was Charlie Brewster? This was me, back in 1960, by the way. You know, I mean, I love horror movies, but I was a very small minority. It was AIP and Hammer back then. It didn't change really till '61 with Psycho. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. Everybody I watched in the Friday Night Frights on the independent television channel, they always had a host. Svengoolie, Elvira, Stagger Lee. And it was always tacky and terrible. And they put no money into it. And but yet they were endearing. You loved them, and that's where I watched movies like Them and the original The Thing and The Creature from the Black Lagoon, you know. And I said, well, if I was Charlie Brewster, I'd be watching that, and if I became convinced there was a vampire next door and nobody believed me, I'd go to Peter Vincent for help. Peter Cushing, Vincent Price. And the minute I thought of that, I couldn't wait to get home and write. because I had the story. I had the concept. I couldn't break Child's Play forever.
Yeah.
It didn't work for me as a script. And then I thought of The Lakeshore Strangler. And I thought, well, if I took a serial murderer and put him in a doll's body, and I gave that to an innocent little boy, well, I'd have a very scary movie. But I mean, I tried to make that work, and I couldn't solve that script. And I left, and I went and I did Fatal Beauty, which nobody ever asked me about. That's Whoopi Goldberg. And and then I thought of Charles Lee Ray and Brad Dourif, because Brad Dourif had been the villain in Fatal Beauty. So I had him as an image in my head, and I'd worked with him. And that was the key, really, to me doing the rewrite on Child's Play, my title.
Now, we have some goodies
Battle
to show
stories,
you.
Everybody. Battle stories from Hollywood.
We have some goodies to show you, but before we do all that, I just want to point out that everything that we just talked about, all your current projects, the books, the podcast, all the links that we can find are going to be in the description of this video, so you can find them yourselves. And
please take a look, everybody.
Have
I'll
fun
tell
with
you,
that.
The podcast with Mark Hamill and Chris Sarand and Fright Night, original cast rating is phenomenal. It's really phenomenal. Yeah, boy.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Michael. And thank you, Jessica. And everybody out there is watching us. I hope you've enjoyed watching this as much as we have, talking about it and making it. And God bless you all. And Tom Holland signing Child's Play.
Right, we always bring a few different things to have, get signed.
Writer, director. Great movie. Haha. And here is the one sheet.
Right, it's from Australia.
Huh?
This one's from Australia. And you see this quote, it says, when people have nightmares, they dream of Freddy. When Freddy has nightmares, he dreams of Chucky.
Oh, that's a good line. I hadn't seen that before. This is from Australia?
Yeah, it's Australian.
Oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, they're getting good at marketing in Australia. Good line. Thank you for asking me to do this, Michael. There we go, everybody. There's Child's Play. I hope you love it. I love it. Bye-bye.
All right. So this is what we were looking at the entire time. I don't know why we set the interview up, the talk time up, looking at this thing, because it just kept drawing my attention. But this is the Bat from Fright Night, Jerry Dandridge. And holy heckins, is it beautiful. Look at that. Wow. Now, years ago, before Jessica and I moved here to Hollywood, I saw pictures of Tom Holland standing here in this living room, pretty much right where I am, with this bat behind him looming over top. And I was like, he still has that. I couldn't believe it. And here I am with it above me. That's cool. Now, of course, there's some good guy dolls here, and they are signed. But what we really want to show you is over here in this case. Look at this. Oh my word. All right, I don't even know. I don't even know how to contain myself. This is Ed's head, and you can still see some of the workings there. The fact that this still exists and it's in Tom's house. Oh no. Wow. Now this blows my mind. This is the actual My Buddy doll that was sitting on Tom Holland's desk whenever he was writing Child's Play. This was the inspiration for it, if you will. He still has it. I heard he never really throws anything away. So there's some really good stuff here. We're not even scratching the surface. Now you may have been wondering what was behind us on the wall. This Fright Night poster that you probably have never seen. And it's actually a Ghana painting. If you're not familiar with those, you should look them up. They get a little strange, a little disturbing. This one here doesn't look as disturbing as some of the ones I've seen. In fact, it actually looks pretty beautiful. But look at that. They were saying that it showed up in the mail one day and they fell in love with it, and of course they had to hang it. Now, right over here, this is the screen-used vampire bat skull. That's insane. It looks real. Like, I don't want to touch it because I feel like it's just going to fall apart in my hands. And then right over here, which was right over Tom's shoulder, is Jerry Dandridge. Not screen-used, of course, art piece. But this is all in his house. This has been one heck of an experience. I mean, doing what we do here on YouTube and being in the world of horror, we have sat and talked with some amazing people, some amazing horror icons, if you will, in the community. I mean, wow. But there's one thing that we want to show you before we leave, and that's inside this box. Now, I gotta be very careful, I'm so nervous. I've never been more nervous about anything in my life. But look at this. You see the plaque? It says Fright Night, December 3rd, 1984. This was the wrap gift at the end of the movie. And inside, you have a wooden stake. Oh yeah, I gotta hold it like that. What am I doing? If I'm gonna be a vampire hunter, I gotta learn how to hold a stake. And also, a cross. This blows my mind. With that being said, thank you for joining us on another Grimm adventure. Until next time, happy Halloween. And don't forget, check out all Tom's links below, especially if you like vampires and Fright Night. Boo.
Wherever I come, bad luck is coming my way. Wherever I go, hard luck is there to stay. Good luck never stays a day. A bad luck's always coming my way.